Hello students, welcome to readmedprepacademy channel. Today in ecosystem part 4 we are going to talk about the plant succession. We very often see that the forests and the lands in our areas are drastically affected by the natural calamities like the flood and the earthquake, and anthropogenic activities like the fire, overgrazing, cutting of trees. Due to these reasons, all plants of an area are destroyed and the areas become nude. So when we observe this area over a period of time, we can see that it will be gradually covered by plant community again and become fertile. Such successive replacement of one type of plant community by the other of the same area or place is known as plant succession. Here in this image you can see the ecological succession, which is a series of predictable changes that occurs in a community over time. Initially you can see the annual plants, later the perennial plants and the grasses, later the shrubs, and later they are replaced by the softwood trees like the pine trees and the hardwood trees. The first invented plants in a barren area are called pioneers. The pioneer species are the lichens, the grass, or the mosses, or a mixture of these. On the other hand, a series of transitional developments of plant communities, one after another in a given area, are called the serial communities. At the end, a final stage and a final plant community gets established, which are called as climax and climax community respectively. Here you can see the serial community is a transitional community or communities that occur before a climax community is established. You can see the pioneer community to the serial community to climax community, where the initial pioneer community and the last is the forest community. In between the serial community. What are the characteristics of an ecological succession? It is a systematic process which causes changes in specific structure of plant community. It is resultant of changes of abiotic and biotic factors. It transforms unstable community into a stable community. Gradual progression in species diversity, total biomass, niche specialization, and humus content of soil takes place. It progresses from the simple food chain to complex food web. It modifies the lower and the simple life form to the higher life forms. It creates interdependence of plants and animals. What are the different types of succession? The various types of succession have been classified in different ways on the basis of the different aspects. These are primary succession, secondary succession, autogenic succession, allogenic succession, autotrophic succession, and heterotrophic succession. Let us discuss one by one. The primary succession is the development of a plant community in a barren area where no community existed before. That is called primary succession. The plants which colonized first in a barren area is called the pioneer species or the primary community or the primary colonies. Generally, primary succession takes a very long time for the occurrence in any region. Example, the microbes, lichens and mosses. Primary succession takes a long time to create the soil from the rock. Examples after volcanic eruption or glacial retreats. You can see that the primary succession occurs where no life already existed here, where the bare rock is present. The mosses and the lichens grow and form the soil when they die. Soil develops and then grasses and small plants grow. Soil thickens and smaller shrubs grow. Later on the tree starts to grow. Secondary succession, the development of a plant community in an area where an already developed community has been destroyed by some natural disturbance like the fire, flood, human activity is known as secondary succession. Generally, this succession takes less time than the time taken for the primary succession. Example, the forest destroyed by fire and excessive lumbering may be reoccupied by herbs over a period of time. Here you can see the secondary succession, which is a diagrammatic representation of the secondary succession where the fire destroys the forest and in the beginning there is no flora or fauna. Later, pioneer species occurs. The annual plants takes about 1 to 2 years to get established, and later the grasses and the perennials take 3 to 4 years, and the intermediate species like the grasses and the shrubs takes about 5 to 150 years, and the climax community is established in about 150 plus years, which has the shrubs and the trees. So what are the difference between the primary and the secondary succession? Primary succession developing in a barren area, secondary succession developing in a disturbed area. Primary succession initiated due to a biological or any other external factors. Secondary succession starts due to external factors only. Primary succession, no soil while primary succession starts, whereas in secondary succession starts where the soil cover is already present. The primary succession, the pioneer species come from outside the environment, whereas in the secondary succession, the pioneer species develop from the existing environment. In primary succession takes more time to complete, whereas secondary succession takes comparatively less time to complete. Now, what is autogenic succession? It occurs as a result of biotic factors. The vegetation reacts with its environment and modifies its own environment, causing its own replacement by new communities. This is known as autogenic succession. Example, in forest ecosystem, the larger trees produce broader leaves, providing shade to the forest floor area. It affects the shrubs and the herbs which require more light, the heliophytes, but supports the shade tolerant species like the sciophytes to grow well. Allogenic succession. Allogenic succession occurs as a result of abiotic factors. The replacement of the existing community is caused by other external factors like the soil erosion, leaching, etc., and not by the existing organisms. Example, in a forest ecosystem, soil erosion and leaching alter the nutrient value of the soil, change of vegetation in that area. Now, what are the differences between autogenic and allogenic succession? The definition: autogenic succession is the ecological succession driven by biotic factors or living organisms in that specific community. Allogenic succession is the ecological succession driven by the abiotic factors or the external factors of the community. The main factors affecting the autogenic succession is the biotic factors. In allogenic succession, it is the abiotic factors or external factors. Primary and secondary succession starts with autogenic succession, whereas the allogenic succession, the primary succession starts with the allogenic succession and proceeds to autogenic succession. Autotrophic succession. If the autotrophic organisms like the green plants are dominant in the early stages of succession, it is called autotrophic succession. This occurs in the habitat which is rich in inorganic substances. Since green plants dominate in the beginning of their succession, there is a gradual increase in the organic matter and subsequently the energy flow in the ecosystem. What is heterotrophic succession? If heterotrophic organisms like bacteria, fungi, actinomycetes and animals are dominant during the early stages of succession, it is called heterotrophic succession. Such a succession takes place in organic habitats. Since heterotrophs dominate in the beginning of such succession, there will be a gradual decrease in the energy content. Here you can see the different types of succession: the primary succession, the secondary succession, the autogenic succession, the allogenic succession, the autotrophic succession and the heterotrophic succession. This is a classification. In primary succession, the development of plant community on the barren area. The secondary succession, development of the plant community in a disturbed area. Autogenic succession, controlled by biotic components of the ecosystem. Allogenic succession, controlled by the abiotic components of the ecosystem. Autotrophic succession occurs in the medium that is rich in inorganic substances. Heterotrophic succession occurs in medium that is rich in organic substances. Now, what are the different types of plant succession? Hydroseer, Mesoseer, Xeroseer, Lithoseer, Haloseer and Samoseer. Now, what is Hydroseer? Succession starts in the regions where water is plenty. Example, ponds, lakes, streams and swamps. What is Mesoseer? Succession starts in regions where moisture condition is adequate. Xerosphere, succession starts in regions where moisture is present in the minimal amount with water. The Xeroseer is classified into Lithoseer, initiating on a barren rock. Haloseer, initiating in the saline water. Samoseer, initiating on a sand. Detailed study of Hydroseer and Lithoseer will be discussed here. Hydroseer. The succession in a freshwater ecosystem is also referred to as Hydroseer. Succession in a pond begins with colonization of the pioneers like the phytoplankton and finally ends with the formation of climax community like the forest stage. What are the stages of Hydroseer? Phytoplankton stage, submerged plant stage, submerged free floating stage, reed swamp stage, marsh meadow stage, shrub stage and forest stage. There are 7 stages. The phytoplankton stage, it is the first stage of succession consisting of the pioneer community like the blue-green algae, green algae, diatoms, bacteria etc. The colonization of these organisms enrich the amount of organic matter and the nutrients of the pond due to their life activities and death. This favors the development of the next cereal stages. Here you can see in this image on the left side, it's a newly formed water body without any flora or fauna. On the right image, the second image, you can see the phytoplankton stage where the phytoplanktons appear on the surface of the water. Now, submerged plant stage. As a result of the death and decomposition of planktons, silt brought from land by rainwater lead to loose mud formation at the bottom of the pond. Hence, the rooted submerged hydrophytes begin to appear on the new substratum. Example, Chara, Utricularia, Vallisneria and Hydrilla, etc. The death and decay of these plants will build up the substratum of the pond to become shallow. Therefore, this habitat replaces another group of plants which are of free floating type. Here in this image, you can see the rooted submerged stage where the plants grow from the mud from the base of the pond. Submerged free floating stage. During this stage, the depth of the pond will become almost 2 to 5 feet. Hence, the rooted hydrophytic plants and with floating large leaves start colonizing the pond. Example, rooted floating plants like Nelumbo, Nymphia and Trapa are seen. Some free floating species like the Azolla, Lemna, Wolfia, Pistia are also present in this stage. By death and decomposition of these plants, further the pond becomes more shallow. Due to this reason, floating plant species are gradually replaced by another species which makes the new cereal stage. On the right side image, you can see the rooted floating stage where the plants have large leaves floating on the surface of the water. Reed swamp stage. It is also called as amphibious stage. During this stage, the rooted floating plants are replaced by plants which can live successfully in aquatic as well as aerial environment. Example, Typha, Phragmites, Sagittaria and Cirpus, etc. At the end of this stage, water level is very much reduced, making it unsuitable for the continuous growth of amphibious plants. In the image, you can see the red swamp stage. Marsh meadow stage. When the pond becomes swallowed due to decreasing water level, species of Cyperaceae and Poaceae such as Carex, Juncus, Cyperus and Eleocharis colonize the area. They form a mat-like vegetation with the help of much branched root system. This leads to an absorption and large quantity of water is lost. At the end of this stage, the soil becomes dry and marshy vegetation disappears gradually and leads to shrub stage. On the right side, you can see the marsh meadow stage. The shrub stage, as the disappearance of the marshy vegetation continues, soil becomes dry. Hence, these areas are now inverted by terrestrial plants like shrubs, salix and cornus, and trees like populus and alnus. These plants absorb large quantity of water and make the habitat dry. Further, the accumulation of humus with a rich flora of microorganisms produce minerals in the soil, ultimately favoring the arrival of new tree species in the area. On the right side image, you can see the woodland stage or the shrub stage. The forest stage, it is the climax community of Hydroseer. A variety of trees invade the area and develop any one of the diverse type of vegetation. Example, temperate mixed forest, Ulmus, Acer and Quercus. Tropical rainforest containing the plants like Artocarpus and Cinnamomum. And tropical deciduous forest like the bamboo and the tectona. In the image on the right side, you can see the forest stage. In the 7 stages of Hydroseer succession, stage 1 is occupied by pioneer community, while the stage 7 is occupied by the climax community. The stages 2 to 6 are occupied by cereal communities. Here, to sum up, you can see the stages of Hydroseer succession. The phytoplankton stage, followed by the submerged plant stage arising from the mud that is present at the base of the pond, and the submerged free floating stage with the leaves floating on the surface of the water, and the red swamp stage, and the marsh meadow stage, the shrub stage, and the forest stage. What is the significance of plant succession? Succession is a dynamic process, hence an ecologist can access and study the cereal stages of a plant community found in a particular area. The knowledge of ecological succession helps to understand the controlled growth of one or more species in a forest. Here you can see the forest succession. In the plant stage, it takes around first 5 years to get established. In the shrub stage, it is about 6 to 25 years. And the young forest occurs between the period of 26 to 50 years. Matured forest occurs in the period of 51 to 150 years. And the climax forest occurs between 150 to 300 years. Utilizing the knowledge of succession, even dams can be protected by preventing siltation. It gives information about the techniques to be used during reforestation and afforestation. It helps in the maintenance of pastures. Here you can see the reforestation process where the forest already existed long ago, and this forest is destroyed or cut or burnt, and replanting of trees is done in the present so that the future will be good. This process is called reforestation process. In afforestation process, where there is no existence of the plants and it's a non-forest area, and the forest planting is done to develop the forest, and in the future the standing forest occurs. Plant succession helps to maintain species diversity in an ecosystem. Patterns of diversity during succession are influenced by resource availability and disturbance by various factors. Primary succession involves the colonization of habitat of an area devoid of life. Here you can see the ecological succession. As the succession proceeds, the biodiversity of the community increases. That means different new types of plants occur in the area in succession. Secondary succession involves the re-establishment of a plant community in a disturbed area or habitat. Forests and vegetation that we come across all over the world are the result of plant succession. Here you can see the secondary ecological succession where the fire damages the forest, and in 0 years there is no vegetation at all, and slowly the pioneer species occurs. In about 1 to 2 years there are annual plants. In 3 to 4 years there are grasses and perennials. The intermediate species occur, which takes about 5 to 150 years, where there are grasses, shrubs, pines and young oak and hickory trees. In the climax community, where we can see the mature oak and hickory forest, which takes about 150 plus years. So today in ecosystem part 3 we discussed about the plant succession. Thank you. Kindly subscribe, like, share and comment the channel Read MedPrep Academy. Log on to www.readmedprepacademy.com for UG and PG MCQs. Facebook ID is Read MedPrep Academy. Our email is readmedprepacademy@gmail.com. Our Instagram is Read MedPrep Academy. Kindly post your questions regarding the lecture in the comment box. We will reply with appropriate answers. Thank you very much.